And so you're watching the screencast for Monday, March 10th. 8th graders, we're going to learn some more spreadsheet techniques using Google Spreadsheets. So I'm going to get myself signed into my Google Drive account. And like you did in the other ones, feel free to pause the screencast at any time so that you can follow along, because you're going to want to make the edits as I do. Hard to type in passwords and talk, so I don't when I type that in. So there's my Google Drive, and I've got a couple more things in there that I didn't have before, you might notice. But what we're going to do is click on Bowling with Friends, and we're going to add on to the spreadsheet. Okay, learn how to do some formatting things. Okay, and learn some other techniques along the way. First of all, as you can see, when you did the averages, some of you got some decimal numbers. That's normal. But what I'm going to teach you today is how to use formulas that involve functions. And functions can be used to make some of your math work a little bit easier. And so, therefore, I'm going to have you take the averages that you entered here, and we're going to get rid of them. You might ask, well, why did we put them in the first place? Well, it's very important that kids learn how to enter formulas, do basic operations, basic math, and then once that type of skill has been mastered, then we can advance over to the functions. That's how I feel anyway. So anyhow, select that region like I did. To select it, you just click in the first cell and drag downward, and all of them will select at once. Okay? And with a selection like that, if you hit the big delete key, you can remove all of that data. In fact, that data was derived by using formulas anyway. So anyhow, the spreadsheet has built-in functions. These are keywords built in with all spreadsheet applications that let you do things like averages and add numbers for you and pick out a given number out of a set of numbers. So those were included in the spreadsheet application. And if you hit the drop down right up here, these are a list of the functions. And these are the list of the most common functions, at least according to Google Spreadsheets. They have one called sum, they have one called average, and as their name would imply, sum would add up a set of numbers for you, average would calculate an average, count would give you a different thing, min, max. There are a lot of functions. If I go to more functions, you'll find more functions than you can probably shake a stick at. Okay, look at all these. And they are keywords. I mean, you have to know the word and then you can apply the function. So I'm scrolling awful fast here, but the names of the functions are right here and the types are right here. So, you know, if you were to sort these differently, and it tells you the syntax. So, boy, look at all the names of all these functions. Search, split, statistical functions, they're all kind of sorted by their type. So anyhow, I just wanted to illustrate that there are a lot of functions out there. So, but we're not here to note how many functions there are. We're here to master about 4 basic ones that are used often in spreadsheets. So anyhow, to calculate the average, another way to do it is to use the function average. So in order to use the function, if you know the function name, you can type it just like you type in a regular formula. You know, I could type in equals and then the name of the function. For us, why don't we use the handy dandy drop down? And when we click on the average function, look what it does. Now I could have typed that, equals, and then the keyword average in the left parenthesis. But it's awful nice to have the computer insert it for you, isn't it? No, all we have to do is select the range of cells that we like to average. So for the mouse user, this is really user-friendly. If I click and I drag through these 3 numbers, and then I just strike the return key, it'll do the average for me. And notice the syntax. So if you were to type it without using a mouse at all, you could type in equals, average, left parenthesis, B3 colon D3. And it'll average up the numbers in that range. The range could be any range. It doesn't have to be a series of numbers like this. It could be a whole block of numbers if you wanted to. Anyhow, when I hit return, look what it does. It does the average for me. Now we're going to learn some things about formatting too. If we click on this number, now whether or not you have decimals or not, really, you should change one of your scores so you get some decimals. So if you don't have a decimal number for your average, change one of the games. You know, instead of at 99, I've got a decimal number, so I don't really have to change mine. So, but let's pretend that I didn't, okay? Okay, if you have a whole number like I do, change one of the games. Just up it by one number and you'll get a decimal. Because we want to learn how to take those decimals and not show them. And there are a number of ways to do it. We're going to use the simple technique. We're going to go up here and click on where it says more formats and hit the drop down, and we're going to choose rounded. Okay, and that'll give us a nice whole number. And so we can say, okay, Mr. Kleinman has a 91 average. So your numbers are going to vary, but anyhow, what I wanted to show you was now that you have one cell done correctly with the correct format and the correct formula, you can fill that. This is called a relative fill. You can fill that formula to adjacent cells, and this is called filling down. And all you have to have is good aim. Okay, so I'll start from ground zero. Click on the cell that has the desired formula. Put your pointer in the tiny blue square down in the corner. See how your cursor changes to a crosshairs? And simply drag downward. And it'll fill this formula to all the cells that you have selected. So isn't that cool? You don't have to repeatedly put in formulas. So I know I had you manually do it last time, but it's important to learn how to enter formulas before you jump over to filling. Okay, now for the high score, we're going to use the max function. That's what max does. It picks out the biggest number in a range. Likewise, low, we'll use the min function. Min picks the smallest number. And then for series total, we're going to use the sum function. So before we fill these, watch my technique. For the high score, I'm going to hit the drop down and choose max. And then I'm going to select the range of cells I'd like to pick the highest score from. Hey, what was Mr. Kleinman's high score? Now be careful when you highlight. Highlight only from B through D. You don't want to put the average in there. We're trying to figure out the maximum score for his 3 games bold, not including the average. So when I hit return, it shows the high score is 98. Here's the cool part. If I change game 1 to a 101, that would be his new high score. So as soon as I do that, notice the average and the high score changed in real time. Cool stuff. For the low score, now we're not going to fill this one yet. All right, watch the technique. For the low score, we're going to use the min function. Okay, same thing. Highlight only these 3 cells and hit return. Okay, for the series total, we're going to use the sum function. We're going to add up his 3 games. So again, we can hit the drop down and choose sum and then highlight just the 3 games and hit return. Now the reason I only did those 3 cells without filling is because I can fill all of these at once. See how I did this? I selected these 3 cells and that put the fill square on the last, the rightmost cell. But if I drag downward, I can fill all 3 at once. Okay, isn't that cool? Now what I'd like you to do is to use the same technique for the average, the high score, and the low score. But realize what these are calculating. These are the average. This is the average of our entire team for game 1. Okay, and so I'm going to show you what my spreadsheet looks like when I'm done. I'm going to pause the screencast, and so you can use the same technique you used before. Maybe I'll do the first one for you. Okay, so for the average, you want to hit the drop down and choose average, but this is the range of cells I want to average. Okay, and likewise, we could do high score and low score. Hey, who had the highest game 1? Who had the lowest game 1? And you know, likewise, I should also do this. I should format this. I don't want to show any numbers after the decimal, so I'm going to round that one. Okay, so you finish up the spreadsheet calculations, and we'll meet back here after I pause this. And so I'm back, and as you can see, I filled in my formulas, right? We never type in numbers. We let the machine pick out the numbers for us, and I filled them all the way across. So now I could answer questions like, who had the highest overall average? Oh, that would be the 213 cell, or, oh, Mr. Harry did. Good for me. Okay, so now that you've got your calculations all done, we're going to do some basic formatting. Okay, basic formatting looks like this. The column headings, as a rule of thumb, we like to boldface those. So as you can see, I selected all of them, and if I click on the bold button, they become bolded. As a rule of thumb, you either, this doesn't look good to have game 1 way over on the left side of this cell and then the number on the right. So as a rule of thumb, you take your column headings. If they are positioned over a number, you'd want to either right align them or center them. So this is how you're horizontally aligned. It's a lot like the word processor. So I'm going to go with center, and these will align these headings in the center. Let's choose right and see what that looks like. Hey, I like that a little bit better. That's a right aligned column heading. Okay, so we're going to want to take and probably take these cells, and you can change the column width. If you point between two column headings, you can drag these a little bit smaller. Okay, here's a tip. If you select all of those columns at the same time, you can do them all at once. So I just undid that. If I drag from B, C, D, I'm dragging the column heading. Notice how I did that? I clicked right on the letter B. And if I select all those columns and change the width of any of them, they'll all change. Okay, now I probably went a little too far. You want to make it a little bit smaller, but maybe not as small as I made it. So now it's reasonable to be able to read them in a little bit smaller amount of space. Okay, for the bowling statistics heading, okay, we'd like to what we call merge and center that across all of these top, however many cells we have. So if I highlight all the way across through H, I can what they call merge and center that. This is the merge button right here. This is how you merge cells. That makes one big cell out of all those little cells. And then why don't we center that and maybe boldface it and crank up its font size. Okay. Now another thing you can do, a lot like you change the column width, you can change your row height. So if I increase a little bit of height right here, okay, and then I take this, it'd be nice to vertically center this in the cell too, wouldn't it? And so if I go up to my vertical alignment button, I can choose center, and that'll center that. So it looks a little bit better, okay? Those are basic formats. Maybe take the names of the bowlers and give them a different color. So maybe we'll go blue, okay? And then for the averages and these important statistics, why don't we color those red, okay? And that is how you format a spreadsheet and how you do those big functions, sum, min, max, and average. So that's it for the screencast. Good job.